On this project, Places of Change, it's a project that looks at Newham area, East London, from the late 19th century to the mid 20th century. And we just really want to focus on like how the community has developed and grown, how migration also has played a role in creating this diverse local community in the area. And we also just want to extract any personal stories that we can and get across an understanding of how life was like for people coming from like Africa, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia as well, and to understand their lived experience. So that's something that we want to get out of the project.
So as part of this project, I think there was kind of like two overlapping processes. One was being trained as a group on a lot of different skills that relate to like the heritage sector, so like the research, kind of like coordinating an exhibition, curating an exhibition, or like being able to give inputs to a designer to have the exhibition designed. And then there was the part of the research itself.
We visited the Museum of London Docklands, we visited the London Metropolitan Archives, Newham Archives, the National Maritime Museum, and all of these different visits kind of gave us a different insight or glance into the different aspects that make up the story.
So I was doing the research and curation of the project. So that role included information on finding archival materials about 19th and 20th century. I looked at primary research around the archive museums like Metropolitan, that includes also Stratford Library, essentially to gather up literally a story that I wanted to tell the audience. And also because I lived around the community, I wanted to tell a story from my perspective of what I learned.
I think this is also what we want to do during this project. We just want to rediscover these people's, this community's history. We try to tell more about this story, which haven't been told enough before.
Is that we've met with a few big institutions and a few big museum groups and curators, and I think I have been amazed at how much of an echo chamber there still exists within these institutions and how much still needs to change, and how a project like this can be part of that change, but it's still like it doesn't start and end here. The conversation needs to continue, and the people who are curating these exhibitions need to work in collaboration with either people who have lived experience of these histories or people who have been researching in the areas or researching with the communities. Otherwise, I don't see the point really of speaking on behalf of a community or a history, and packaging it in a way in which it is like palatable to the average person who enters an exhibition space. I think there needs to be a bit of a shift in that.
But I feel like the one thing that we did get out of all these visits is that there is kind of a missing element everywhere we go. It almost feels like a ghost. And so when you kind of read this research or you read in these archives, it's not tangible, but there is something there that deserves to be explored. And I think we've kind of found that actually it's not as easy to kind of bring that into light. The further we got along and the further we got into the archives and the deeper we got into the archives, and realising that actually, there are no first-hand accounts or very little first-hand accounts, and thinking, why is that?
When we visit the Maritime Museum, when we visit the Museum of London Docklands, we can see there are so many fabulous ships inside. There are beautiful picture about the Royal Docks area, but we want to know more about the people who live in this area. We want to know more about especially people of color who work in this area.
That we thought we'd find, diary entries or some sort of, tangible record of their experience and what they felt and what they did and what they lived. But in reality, it's been almost like a lens. It's very sterile, the idea that the newspaper clippings or sketches, it's always been coming from an external point of view.
a lot of us were trying to do during this project was kind of trace not only the happy continuities between multicultural London in the 19th century and multicultural London today, but also the cost of that multiculturalism and like the cost that racialized subjects have to pay.
You know, we're reading these articles that are like kind of quite racist about like, you know, they're from the 1900s, really racist articles, and we're reading against the narrative and saying like, this is actually a story that isn't about a lazy Lascar. This is a story about, you know, someone saying, you know, refusing orders from their subordinates, and that's a really great story, and you have to look against the grain, you know, like to find it sometimes. And that's like, I think it can be a really great process.
I've kind of never seen history as detached from the present day. If anything, I believe that you can't understand the present day without, you know, looking at our history. And so in that context, I feel that the story of the Royal Docks communities, and especially the foreign sailors, plays such an important role in understanding East London, the docks today.
I would say in the beginning, like, I didn't even have that much knowledge on, like, the docks and, like, its history. And now I was like, why is this important? But now coming to, like, the end of the project, I understand, like, that it's, like, the river and, like, the role it plays in, like, people's journeys, it is really important because, like, it's a part of their stories. It's, like, what brings people from their place of origin to Britain and, like, to East London and Newham area to build, like, a life for themselves afterwards. So I feel like it is, like, a really powerful thing, like the docks. It is really interesting to see, like, how it connects everyone.
Yeah, I feel like a sort of link to this place and to the history of the place in a way that I never thought I would have. So it's, yeah, really cool to be able to, like, have all this information and this knowledge and this history, and also to be hopefully curating an exhibition where other people can also identify with some of these themes that we've identified with and kind of begin to explore the history and continue that relationship, because we now get to leave the Royal Docks, but obviously people still live here and people still walk these streets every day.